There are stories that seem impossible, straight out of the darkest fiction, but this one isn't. This is a true story, a tale that defies logic and sends chills down your spine. Imagine sitting at a funeral, surrounded by family and friends mourning your passing, your memory. And suddenly, you show up alive, walking among them, watching every tear, every sigh of pain. Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what happened in the case of Noela Rukundo, a case that shook an entire country and then the world. Noela Rukundo, a woman from Burundi, a country in the heart of Africa, found herself caught up in a story that seemed straight out of a mystery novel. Her husband was declared dead and everyone believed he was no longer among them. However, what no one expected was that this dead man would reappear at his own funeral, giving this story a chilling and unexpected twist. The country, marked by its ancestral traditions and strong sense of community, watched in astonishment as a personal tragedy turned into a phenomenon of disbelief. But to understand the scope of this story, it's necessary to dive into the context, into Noela and her husband's relationship, and into what led everything to end in such a dramatic way. Noela and her husband were not an ordinary couple. Although their marriage began with hope and shared dreams, the shadow of distrust and jealousy soon began to loom over their life together. In a place where family and honor are held almost sacred, suspicions could be dangerous, and that's exactly what happened. She began to suspect that her husband was not being faithful to her. Rumors, unexplained absences, and certain behaviors planted doubt deep in her soul. The fear of being betrayed, of being left behind, grew until it became an obsession. And that's where the story takes a dark turn. Noela, caught between love and resentment, began to plan something no one could have imagined: to get rid of her husband forever. A decision that would change everything and lead the couple into an abyss from which there would be no return. The day her husband disappeared, the community was plunged into sadness. The authorities declared that he had died, and the news spread quickly. The woman, apparently heartbroken, began to prepare the funeral, a ceremony filled with pain and respect. The streets were crowded with people coming to say their goodbyes. The air was heavy, full of whispers and tears. Family members hugged each other, friends wept, and in the midst of all that mourning, no one suspected the hidden truth behind that facade of sadness. It was at that funeral where the surprise no one could have foreseen was unleashed. When the coffin was about to be closed, a man appeared walking through the crowd, alive and well, in the midst of absolute silence. It was Noela's husband, the man everyone thought was dead. Disbelief paralyzed everyone. The whispers turned into screams and confusion filled the air. How was this possible? Why had he disappeared? What was he doing there, at his own funeral? For Noela, that moment was a nightmare come true. The truth began to come to light, and with it, the pieces of a puzzle that no one had been able to put together. The story of an attempted murder, of a life put in danger, of a macabre plan that ended up failing. But to understand the weight of all this, you have to look beyond the event itself, to grasp the cultural and social context of Burundi, a country where marriage is a vital institution and family is a fundamental support network. In that environment, betrayal doesn't just affect two people, but an entire community. Honor becomes a kind of currency, and any stain can leave a permanent mark. Noela and her husband had built a life together, but beneath the surface, the cracks ran deep. Suspicion and jealousy, in a place where relationships are close-knit and visible, quickly began to spread. Arguments became more frequent, and the atmosphere at home grew tense. Neighbors started to notice the distance, and rumors grew like a shadow creeping ever closer. For Noela, the fear of losing her husband and the anger over what she believed he was doing to her led her to make the most dramatic decision. And so she began to move the pieces so that he would disappear, so that no one could ever claim him again. But, as in every dark story, fate played its own part, because the husband survived. Not only that, but he was present at the ceremony where everyone mourned him, watching every gesture, every tear. This act of showing up alive at his own funeral became a powerful symbol of truth, justice, and redemption. But it also raised profound questions about love, betrayal, and the fragility of appearances. This first part of the story is only the beginning of a case that will test not only the faith of a community, but also the human capacity to face lies, guilt, and forgiveness. Now that we know the context, the drama surrounding Noela and her husband, we are ready to delve into the details of the plan, the failed attempt, and the shocking revelation that shook Burundi and the entire world. After months of suspicions and tensions tangled like a spider's web, Noela decided she had to act. Desperation, a mix of fear and anger, drove her to devise a plan no one could have imagined, to eliminate her husband. But not just in any way, rather with a calculated, cold, and ruthless method. The first step was to win the trust of some friends and acquaintances who could help her carry out her plan. Noela used her charisma to convince those around her that her husband was putting the family in danger, that he was a problematic man and needed to disappear. That's how she wove a web of deceit and lies, seeking support for her dark cause. The plan itself seemed simple on the surface, but was full of details that revealed the disturbed mind of its creator. Noela hired a man to take care of the problem, making sure that everything would remain a secret. She believed that this way she could free herself from the burden her husband represented without raising suspicion. But reality quickly proved that idea wrong. The execution was far from perfect. The attempted murder was violent and brutal, but unexpectedly, the husband survived, wounded and weakened, but alive. What happened next is almost unbelievable. The man disappeared without a trace, hiding in the shadows, far from his home and from those who wanted him dead. His goal was simple: recover, plan his return, and seek justice. Meanwhile, in the village and among the family, news of his death spread like wildfire. Noela, pretending to be the grieving widow, organized the funeral, a ceremony that became the stage for one of the most shocking moments in recent history. The funeral was filled with emotion and sadness. The attendees wept, hugging each other in silence, remembering the life of the man everyone believed was lost forever. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with a mix of pain and resignation. And then, just as the coffin was about to be closed, the impossible happened. The man appeared, walking through the crowd, his presence slicing through the air like a sharp knife. The shock was absolute. Faces filled with disbelief, mouths fell open in silence, and the funeral came to a sudden halt. It was a moment frozen in time. No one could believe what their eyes were seeing. Some thought it was a macabre joke, others feared for their lives. But the truth was right there in front of them, undeniable. The husband, alive and bearing visible wounds, told his story. He revealed how he managed to survive, how he had been in hiding all that time, and how he finally decided to come forward to face reality and expose those who had tried to kill him. This act of courage triggered a thorough investigation. The authorities began to unravel the plot behind the disappearance and attempted murder. Noela, who until then had seemed untouchable, watched as her world crumbled piece by piece. The trial was closely followed not only in Burundi, but around the world. The story of the man who witnessed his own funeral became a symbol of the fight for truth and justice. During the proceedings, chilling details came to light. Noela's meticulous planning, her motivations rooted in jealousy and fear, and the coldness with which she tried to end her husband's life shocked everyone. The verdict was clear and unequivocal: guilty. Justice had spoken, but the emotional and social impact of the case continued to resonate within the community. This case sparked a debate about relationships, trust, and the limits of human desperation. How can someone come to plan the death of a person they once loved? And what happens when the truth comes out in the most unexpected way? For Noela, the fall was devastating. She lost not only her freedom, but also the respect and affection of those around her. Her story is a painful reminder of what can happen when negative emotions take hold of the soul. But it's also a testament to the power of life and resilience. The husband, who against all odds survived, found the strength to return and claim what was his, the truth and justice. The community, for its part, learned a bitter lesson about appearances and the reality hidden behind facades. What seemed like a simple tragedy turned into a drama full of secrets and revelations. In Burundi and beyond, this story became a symbol of hope and a warning. The hope that the truth always finds its way, and the warning that the shadows of the human soul can be dangerous when left unchecked. The story of Noela and her husband is much more than just a police case. It is a reflection of the complexities of love and hate, of life and death, and of the constant struggle between darkness and light within each person. As the trial unfolded, the husband slowly regained his life, rebuilding not only his body but also his story, which had almost been erased by the attempted murder. The lingering question is how to move on after such a traumatic experience, how to heal wounds that time cannot erase, and how to find meaning in what seemed like a definitive ending. But that is another story. The next part will take us into the outcome of the trial, the consequences for Noela, and the final reflection on this unique and chilling case that no one will ever forget. Noela Rukundo's trial became an event that captured both national and international attention. Every detail, every testimony, revealed a truth as dark as it was unsettling. During the sessions, accounts were heard that painted a complex picture of a relationship marked by distrust and fear. Noela, sitting in the dock, kept a cold expression, but her eyes could not hide the tension consuming her. The testimonies were compelling, friends who confirmed their suspicions, evidence that demonstrated the meticulous planning of the attempted murder, and the husband's statement, who bravely recounted how he survived the ambush that nearly cost him his life. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence that made it clear Noela had orchestrated everything to get rid of him, using third parties to carry out her plan. The court had no choice but to convict her of attempted murder and conspiracy. But beyond the legal verdict, what struck everyone was the depth of the human drama. How can someone go so far in their desperation? What drives a person to want to eliminate someone they once loved? Noela's husband, though scarred by the experience, spoke with unexpected strength. He not only recounted how he managed to survive, but also how he decided to return to face the truth, not just for himself, but for justice and for the community. His appearance at the funeral, that moment etched into the collective memory, became a symbol of resilience and hope. The image of a man who came back from the dead to reclaim his place in the world moved thousands. But the story doesn't end there. The community of Burundi was forced to deeply reflect on its values, its traditions, and the fragility of human relationships. This case revealed how appearances can be deceiving, and how behind a friendly face there can be a mind full of darkness and sinister plans. It also showed the importance of truth and justice as fundamental pillars for healing wounds, rebuilding lives, and preventing similar tragedies in the future. Noela, convicted and imprisoned, had to face not only the weight of the law, but also the rejection of those who were once close to her. Her story is a warning and a lesson about the consequences of letting negative emotions control our actions. For the husband, the battle didn't end with the trial. Physical recovery was only the first step. Rebuilding his life, his trust, and his dignity was a long and painful process, but also one filled with hope. His return to everyday life was accompanied by the attention and support of the community, who admired his courage and his ability to forgive, even if he could never forget. This story, which began with suspicion and jealousy, turned into a tale of survival and redemption. An example of how the truth can come to light even in the darkest circumstances. The man who witnessed his own funeral not only defied death, but also challenged everyone to look beyond appearances and to value the importance of justice and truth. As we close this chapter, we are left with a powerful reflection. In life, reality can surpass fiction. And sometimes, what we believe to be impossible may just be the beginning of a story that deserves to be told, heard, and remembered.